Welcome back, everybody. Just while we're getting set up. Hit the button, Hamish. Welcome back, councillors, after the afternoon tea break. And we have RDR Management Limited here now. We've got Tony McCormick, the CE, and Jen Crawford, the Chair. Welcome. It's being recorded. I think you've got about 15 or something slides, Tony, so you'll go through them first and we'll take questions at the end. So councillors, if Tony has a slide up and you think there's a question coming up, just make note of the slide number and then at the end we'll go back to it and have some good discussion on the presentation. So Tony, we'll hand over to you and Jen, and welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure what I call you in this forum. Neil.
Your Worship.
Your Worship. Oh,
or hey you, Tony.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I just made the comment to someone, it is a wee while since I've been in front of the council because they are new faces. I mean, I recognise the faces, but I know I haven't met you all, so thank you for the opportunity. This is really just a general update. We haven't come with a particular mission in mind, except to re-familiarise you with what we think is one of the most important businesses in the region, the lifeblood of Mid Canterbury. So the presentation, I've chunked it up, I guess. An intro, just a reminder of what we do, who we are, what we do. Bit of an update that what's happened and what's on now, and then looking forward into the future, what lies ahead. And as His Worship just mentioned, I would like to, if you don't mind, I'll go through the presentation. It's fairly snappy, but I did want to make sure we had a good chunk to sort of engage if need be, and I'm happy to pop back to any slides that we want. So first of all, just to sort of paint the picture, some of you may have seen this picture, but that is Mid Canterbury, Ashburton, sort of centre bottom, and the blue squiggle up the top, I'll just go over that with my red crayon just to say, well, that is the race. It's a 67-kilometre race that connects the Rangitata River or Rakatata River with the Rakaia. How does it work? Got a consent to take about 30 cumecs from the Rangitata River. We have a secondary intake at the Ashburton, where we're currently consented to take 7.1. I've just asterisked that because I come back to it. There is also a consent held by BCI to take 6 cumecs from the Rakaia River, and we can pump, or that can be pumped back up into the race. So we can take water from both ends. We can't make it flow uphill, as you will imagine, but it's a very flat race, so we can use that 6 cumecs up to the point just behind Methven. What else have we got? We keep fish out. So the one up on the left, that's the big one that hopefully you are familiar with, $18 million worth of fish exclusion up there. We do have one on the South Ashburton, and there's also one on the Rakaia River. So we take water and leave the fish at home. We've got 2 power stations in the scheme owned by Manawa, previously Trustpower. The original one down the end at Highbank, and Montalto power station in Montalto, funnily enough. So that is the mode we operate in 4 months of the year. We take nearly 30 cumecs from the Rangitata River, put it right through the scheme, generate full power, if you like, with it, which will be about 30 megawatts, and it all goes in the Rakaia River. We're also supplying stock water and mar throughout that season as well. We do that 365. Irrigation season, we start to push the water or let the water out through the schemes. There's essentially 3 schemes. It was Mayfield Hines, Valletta and Ashburton Lyndhurst. MH&V have combined, so those 2 schemes. So all the water is fully allocated. Anything that is not required for stock water is allocated to the irrigators, and it all goes there. About 100,000 hectares irrigated. We are the largest scheme in New Zealand, largest water supply scheme, and if you really want an exciting metric, we deliver at least 5 times and normally 6 times Auckland's total water supply, 365 days of the year. So we're pretty big. Sure, we don't treat it and chlorinate it and put it through taps, but it's a lot of water. It's a big scheme. And yeah, just to remember. Okay, how we set up, again, I expect most of you, but RDR ML, RDR Management Limited, owns and manages the scheme on behalf of its owner shareholders. Our shareholders are all water users, and we've got the 4 of them there. Ashburton District Council, primarily for stockwater, Manawa for the generation and the 2 irrigation schemes. BCI, I didn't quite fill in, but all the yellow at that date, and this is quite an old mark, is Bahil Chertsey, who are sort of become an infill irrigator. So they supply, even though their consent is down at the bottom, they irrigate throughout the region, including right up here by our intake. We do that through a water swap, which I won't go into, but it works. So they've got about 20,000 hectares under us, and the other 2 schemes collectively about 80,000. So yes, that's the 4 shareholders. I will just say that they've all got, there was 5 before MH and V joined, so all 5 shareholders were 20% shareholders, equal shareholding. Now MHV, just because of that amalgamation, own 40%, but they're all sort of equal shareholders. The council also holds an additional shareholding, which I tend to call the Jenny Shipley shares. I'm not sure if that's appropriate or it's right, but they are special shares, and the folklore is that they are given to the council as almost a protection for is recognising, I guess, that this is a regional community essential asset, and it's just a mechanism by which the council would be able to influence, veto any radical decisions about ownership and such like. Again, I've asterisked that for that reason and for one other that I'll come back to. Okay, so that's us. What's happened recently, we have completed and commissioned the fish screen. We're coming up to 2 years of operation with that. It's been a learning curve, but one thing I can guarantee is that we are 100% excluding fish from the race, and they are all being returned safely to the river. So I think something like 250,000 more salmon smolt in the river than there was 2 years ago. And the other thing I put there, Klondike Storage Facility. So this is, I think it's called the Klondike Pond by people's. This is a large facility that RDRML consented in 2018. Faced some challenges and such like, but it was a consented package. We own the land to build a very large storage there. That development option has been transferred or sold to the 2 irrigation companies. So it's still kind of within the tent and certainly within the region, but it was primarily because the council in Manawa said, well, look, the storage per se does not provide us with a lot more utility. We don't see merit in us investing capital into that development. It's fair enough, it's no surprise. I will just say, while I said about equal shareholding, all our costs are allocated on a water use basis, a proportionate water use basis. So my $5 million a year, Manawa pay between 60 and 70% because that's how much of the water they use. The council uses about 1.5%, so that's how much of those costs they pay on an annual basis. And that varies a bit as we go through. We have different seasons, we smooth that out, but that's the cost allocation mechanism. So apologies, I omitted that. So briefly, the fish screen, that was before it got wet. That was public day. I can see with the signs on that. That was sort of public days in schools and what have you we had through the screen. If you go up there now, it's not very exciting. It's all underwater and doing its job. But that is it's $18 million sitting there. So yeah, we've got these 7 screens and very fine mesh that filters. Yeah, we're filtering 30,000 litres a second through a 2 mil fine screen. Largest in certainly in Australasia and probably in the southern hemisphere of its kind. Klondike, artist's impression obviously, and this is 53 million cubic metres, which is unimaginably big. But I think what is more likely to be developed will be a staged development of several ponds, just because 53 million is just such an enormous amount, and it'll probably be done over a period, it could be 20 or 30 years. That's up to the new owners now. So that was just a concept of a couple of ponds fitting on a compact footprint. What's on now? Flood repair work. Believe it or not, we have only just started, but it's been a long journey from being smashed up in June 2021 with the floods to actually getting out there and starting to repair. We experienced quite major damage at 7 sites. The canal goes across, as it goes across the scheme, we go under 8 rivers. So that's the obvious ones, the two Ashburton, Hakatiri rivers, the Hines, Boyers, Taylors, and even Dry Creek. We take the scheme under it. So we've got structures right on the river, in the river just about, and yeah, several of those got quite badly damaged. The other thing that's on at the moment is the expansion of MAR, the Managed Act for Recharge. So that's being driven almost entirely through the trust, HH Wet we call them. They are looking to expand their capacity with more sites. They need extra water. The only water available in the district is kind of out of our allocation, and there is those of you, I did present, it was probably the year before last, but just on this sort of spare water that's available for a particular part of the year, a generation season, and they're looking to access that, probably up to 3 QMEX if that means anything. That whole process, it's our water, it's a different use of our water. Our current consent allows us to do stock water, irrigation, hydrogeneration. We are not consented to provide water for MAR, so we need another consent to do that, and that whole process is stalled. There's no better word for it with ECAN at the moment. Frustrating, but HH Wet are driving that, and we're supporting them. Just a quick look, bit hard to sort of work out, but this is South Ashburton on the south side. So this is where the canal stops and goes under the river, comes under the river here. So we have these sort of protection armour works, and this was fairly minor site of damage. The water's come under, undercut, ripped these concrete facing off. So what we've done to repair is cut all that off and replacing it. And you can see that was just last week. We're into Grant Hood, providing that service. Okay, so that's a very quick sort of what we've got on at the moment. And I guess the other thing we've got on at the moment is a very dry summer with a lot of people screaming out for water. But we've had from our end, it's been pretty good. We've been on restriction a few times, but generally, I think we've kept all our water users pretty happy. Now, each of these subjects, I've got a separate slide, so I'll just touch on them. But I thought this is perhaps where we should be focusing our thoughts. So stock water, that whole delivery transfer, well, I think it's broadcast, the council is looking to get out of stock water, so I just want to touch on that, some of the implications of that. The Ashburton River, I'm sure some of you would have heard from water users, but this is the first year that there is a new consenting regime on the Ashburton River, and a lot of people have been hurting this season. There's a number of factors, so I just want to touch on that. The Rakatata River Revival, that is the project that's being driven primarily by DOC, I guess. I just want to touch on that. Emergency management, quite a hot topic. Highbank is coming out for reversion. It's going to be out of service for 19 months. It's never happened before in the 85 years of the scheme. It's quite unprecedented. I just want to touch on sort of some of the issues associated with that. And climate change, and I guess you'd have to say what major infrastructure owner could be giving any presentation that didn't include some consideration of climate change. So stock water, so yeah, it's council wanting to move out of it, and there's been various sort of forays, I guess, into looking at using the schemes and such like. That is the way to go, I think. The schemes can distribute water to a lot of the area, but it's incomplete. It's very extensive, but there is still areas that we cannot get stock water to, or the schemes. And that, it's an essential supply, so something we can't just leave people high and dry. So, yeah, it's going to be that sort of 80-20. 80%'s a doddle, is easy, but 20%'s going to require a lot of effort. I'm just flagging here, and look, I'm sort of looking at Hamish because I haven't had this conversation with you, Hamish, but you guys have got a couple of consents or some consents for stock water. And if we're going to bring it into the scheme, bring some of that water into the scheme, I'd like to talk about perhaps transferring some aspects of those assets, consents, probably more the Rangitata ones. The other ones, I'm not sure they will still remain operable. But I know the idea is to get off the lowland streams and get out of rivers and all that sort of thing. But you know, we've got a fixed allocation, and we're running that water at the moment. So maybe that consent could come our way. Just conversation stuff at this thing. The other thing I'm just flagging. I said the 4 shareholders are all water users. And if the ADC is out of stock water, they're no longer a water user, so do they belong at the table or not? And I'm not trying to push you off by any stretch, but it's just something constitutionally I think we'll probably have to address. The fact that you hold those community good shares is very significant, and so, yeah, it's just a consequence we've got to work through, I guess. The Ashburton River, as I say, new consent regime. It's been effective this season, and it really is biting some people. It has been a hard summer, and there's some contributing factors to that. One is the obvious climate, but the other thing that's happened for the last 2 years, so since the May 21 floods, the Ashburton River has not gone on restriction. So the whole catchment just got filled up. Groundwater levels were through the roof. We were making water instead of losing water. That's finished. It's all drained out. It happened to coincide with us getting a very dry summer. So groundwater systems have been struggling. It's been really hot, and there's no longer access to that water in the river. The river itself has been running low, and people's restriction has been made. Yeah, it's harder for them to access water. So there's a whole lot of things come together, and it's we are very aware. We have a slightly different consent regime, and we've managed, like, we were able to take some water throughout January when nearly everyone was off. I know that's a point of some contention, but that is the consents and the plan that was you know, sort of consented, publicly notified, and such like. And so yeah, there is some discussions around there. 2033, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the plan already has that the 6 cubic limit goes to 10, and that would just have everybody off. It's a real, I think it's so hard, people are just saying, you know, we're going to have to wait until, that just cannot happen, and I tend to agree. So, but no, we've got more on our plate. Everyone's got more on their plate at the moment. I just wanted to briefly touch on the Rangitata River Revival. I think it's pretty impressive what they've achieved and what they're putting out, their comms, a lot of things. It has been generally a collaborative model. Unfortunately, we haven't been part of that, which is, and you know, we're a pretty significant party in the river. I have got involved in, there's a subgroup looking at the south branch of the Rangitata and looking at perhaps relivening that, and it's been great to get at the table with these same people and sort of be part of those discussions. So one concern I do have is that it's separate from the statutory planning process, and I'm just flagging that like the ECAN renewing their regional policy statement, you know, they were getting submissions from everyone, but nothing again on that group did not, as far as I'm aware, provide any submissions, and everybody's saying, oh, they're looking after that, but yeah, and they're doing a pretty good job, but it's not flowing into the statutory, you know, the updated plans and things like that. So it's just something to be aware of. Look, emergency management, I just want to say, we've engaged with Jim. I mean, even after the floods, I guess it sort of heightened an awareness, and there was a certain higher degree of awareness and activity, but since Jim's come on board, he's engaged with us. We've had some great workshops, and we are actively looking at significantly improving, I guess, our planning and preparation, to the point of even making modifications at our scheme, that if there's a decent shake, the thing will shut down automatically, type of thing, because we suddenly realised that you can say, oh, we'll get up there and shut it down, but we probably can't get up there, and the comms is out, and everything's dead, and yet we don't want 5 times Auckland's water flowing into the region, type of thing. So yeah, it's been great, and yeah, commend Jim for his engagement. Highbank, I did say unprecedented. It's a complete replacement of the whole kit and caboodle there, of end of life replacement basically. So it's a massive job. The consequence, we can no longer sort of, well, generation season's fairly clear. They don't need it. We won't bring it in. But in the summertime, where they're on and off and filling it, it's going to be quite quite constraining for how we operate from a flexibility point of view. It is likely we'll be spilling into the two Ashburton rivers, or the North Ashburton in particular, on a much more than we have done in recent times. We've made an effort not to do that, but yeah, we will work through it. It is a one-off, you know, as I say, once in 85 years. It's the sort of thing that happens with major infrastructure, so we don't become Wellington Water type of thing. So yeah, it's got to be done. But one of the things I talked about, this proportional water use of all the users. That's what we use to allocate our costs. This is going to be a significant sort of bump in it, that suddenly our 60% water user isn't going to use anything for a year and a half. So you can sort of paint your own picture for that, but we're just working through that. The implications of that, operationally, we've got to work out how we can optimise. We're looking for alternative uses of water. Great opportunity for Ma to get a real drink through that period, but we have to get that consent sorted out. So, yeah. Last one, climate change. I'm just saying we're an alpine river, so we're expecting, quite a different flow regime, much flashier, higher flows. I'm less concerned about that because I've got a very robust bit of engineering up on our intake there. We do need storage to handle that more variable flow. My biggest concern about climate change, I guess, is the lowland streams, all those streams across the plains. We've already seen 2021 was a 200-year flood. That's tomorrow's 50-year flood, and so on. And our assets have already shown that they're ageing and can be bashed up by those sorts of things. So we are looking at some major investment to rebuild, redesign some of those key assets over that time. How do we do? Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. That was great overview of the whole RDR. And just for Council's information, if you don't know, I'm a Director of RDR, appointed by yourselves, and Councillor Wilson is my alternate. And in Councillor Wilson's previous life, he was the Chair of RDR for 5 or 6 years, if not more. Yeah, so 9 or 12, was it? 12, yeah. So Councillor Wilson knows the RDR at the back of his hand as well. Jen, did you want to add anything, or before we go to questions?
I'm happy just to go to questions if you like. I think it was a good summary by Tony, but the key message from us is we value the relationship with our council shareholder, regardless of the outcome of the Stockwater conversation. We see the RDR as an enduring asset within this community. It's not going anywhere, so the relationship is really important to us.
Yeah, and as you said, Tony, it's the lifeblood of Mid-Canterbury, and it certainly is. Without the forethought of our forebearers who put it in, we wouldn't be what we are today. So, and you run it on pretty much the smell of an oily rag with sort of half a dozen people, I think, all up. You run the whole thing. Yeah. I'll keep your light on to it, yeah.
Yeah.
To say that.
Yeah, 6.5 staff. A lot of it's obviously remote control and telemetry and such like, but yeah, the sort of leverage on one thing I will perhaps mention, and will be of interest to you all. I've been thinking for a while of getting a specific sort of economic impact study of the RDR and all its associated schemes, so that we can sort of hand on heart or with some credibility say, look, this is the value add of this scheme, because we are in defence and protection mode. To a large degree, we need to hold on to this incredibly valuable asset and access to water that we have, and we need to make sure that our story can be told, I guess.
Great. Councillor Cameron, questions?
Thank you. That was really tremendous overview. Thank you very much. Great summary. As you mentioned, Ashburton District Council is thinking of reducing or getting out of the main races. A lot of water
Stockwater,
races.
yep.
Yeah, Stockwater races. And you alluded to the fact that the RDR is not available to everybody. How big an area would miss out on water from RDR if we
It's a bit blotchy. It's a wee bit. I mean, if you looked at the map of Stockwater distribution, 15 years ago and now, there's huge areas that have been able to shut down as the need for that, but there's still these outliers and what have you. So it's a bit like that with us. I know, for instance, Anima. I was involved in there's
Yes.
a review just recently. I looked at that. We sort of put a little bit of water in there, but there's just not the infrastructure to distribute it. So it's very dispersed. And when I said 80-20, look, it's probably 95-9. should I say,
Okay.
95.5, that, you know, the schemes will be able to address quite a bit. Of course, they are connected and obliged to their shareholders, so non-shareholders. So there's some commercial things to deal with. There's some engineering or logistical issues to deal with. I think it's fair to say the water's there. I wouldn't be so concerned that there's not enough water, especially if, you know, if we can have access to the existing consents, because what the schemes will be able to do is deliver it a lot more efficiently. You know, we'll just
Of course.
only need this little bit and it'll
Yeah.
get there. Look, it is quite a process. There's a lot of work there to work through and be content, because I think, you know, as I say, it's almost an essential. It's a funny old thing, isn't it? It's almost like an essential service, but I know the council is not required to provide that. So everybody is interested. Everybody is looked after. So bit of a long
It's a
answer to that, but
tricky
yes,
thing.
there's probably the water. There's engineering work that there's always a solution there, but there is some commercial stuff about who pays for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Lovett?
The big fish screen, it was pretty impressive going up there looking at it that day. And we're looking at all the holes in it and thinking all the silt coming down in the river,
Yes.
especially as it's always, you know, flooding and things. Is it coping, or how often does it backwash?
Yes, we are. We've reached a position, and as I say, it's 2 years since we turned it on, and we have learnt a lot in that 2 years. Some of it we foresaw and some of it we didn't. Yeah, it would have been great if we could have put that below our silt trap. You know, we have a sand trap there. Just for a number of reasons it's come above it, so it does see all that silt. And look, most of it either goes down the bypass, is carried on through, comes through the fish screen, and we're still taking the same amount of water, silt out of the sand trap. But if I showed you that, the picture with the water drained, if I drained it right now, there would be a lot of silt lying around. So yeah, it's deposited where there's, you know, low velocities, and certainly on the downstream side, but it has not hampering or hindering the operation. So yeah, we weren't holding our breath. We knew what to expect with silt, and it is that and more type of thing. So yeah, we are managing. Debris is actually more of a problem than silt. You know, the flush like we had day before yesterday brings down a lot of vegetative matter, and we have to go into sort of a different mode of operation to get on top of that, because the screens can block quite quickly if we don't keep ahead of it. But we've learnt, and we've got through this year without any problem. So yeah,
It's good to know.
Councillor Bryan?
Tony or Jen, either or. You mentioned before the Ashburton River consents.
yes.
Now they are getting hurt. I understood that a lot of people along the river, they've got their consent and far bigger than what they can use.
The consents.
Yeah, they've got the water consents, what is huge, and
Yeah.
they only use half.
Yeah.
So is that stopped, or what is the problem?
Well, there's a lot more. One of the outcomes of the consent review was there is a lot more people are deemed to be connected to the river. So, and especially groundwater people. There'll be people this season that have never been on restriction, never had to even look at the river because they didn't think. But now their consent says if the river flow drops, you have to turn off. So there's about 50 by my count that are now have got consents tied to that river flow out here. Look, Lean, the one thing I'd say is that there's often a misconception with these consents. You know, you'll get a consent for 300 litres a second, and you know the number of times you're pumping 300 litres a second is so small. You know, you've sort of got to have a high capacity to be able to take those small amounts. There was certainly a case that the river, it was deemed to be over allocated, and that is, I think, on volume and capacity. Now the consent review has shrunk that. That was one of the things. I mean, our consent has been chopped in half, and a part of it is a lot harder. You know, the river has to be well up, so it sort of achieved what it wanted to. But you know, the question is it perhaps, I don't know, I dare to say, has it gone too far? You know, that's an issue for ECAN I hope to review, and I hope they're getting the message that the new regime is proving very hard and having a huge impact on a lot of people. Lakehood is a classic one. I mean, I'm sure I know some of you were there at Lakewood. A lot of that, I won't say all of it, is a result of the new flow regime, because they would be able to have trickled a bit of water in there all season.
So if
So
Can
I'm
I
not sure if that answered, but I'd be wary of that. That's a perception. But it's more about, it doesn't mean people are taking more water than they need. You can be very sure of that.
So the 50 farmers you talk about, or the consents, they can't get any water. So basically it stops it completely, or is it, can they still make a living, or is it completely,
No,
that's it,
there is
no water?
in between what I can see, between January the 1st and the end of February, those 50 people had about 4 days of access to water. I mean, if they've got storage, they can make, they might be able to make that work, because they can, and that's where they need their 300 to, the river's up, let's fill it, and I only use, 50 litres, and it stretches it out. But no, there is, I think there will be some that have really found it difficult.
It affects the viability of their business.
Absolutely.
Those decisions that were made by Environment Canterbury,
Yep.
rightly or wrongly. But who's next? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, that probably leads on to my question. It follows the same path. Your consent is, pretty critical, because you could say the Ashburton was a dry run where it's affected many people's livelihoods, and in turn it'll affect the districts, the urban centres and all that sort of stuff. What are you doing with regards to the potential renewal of your consent, and what can Ashburton District do to help? And who are the main parties involved in that? Who makes that decision, and who do we, when you're talking to people, and who's that?
No, very, very on the mark question, Richard, thank you. That's why I sort of look at that Rakitata River Revival, because they are key people. They are deemed to be, the parties involved in the river. So they are very key, and Arawhenua in particular have a strong influence in that. So that our relationship with them is very important at many levels, at both sort of governance level and also personal, like myself. So being able to stay engaged and discuss constructively with them, and I think personally, my relationship's good. They, it's a funny thing, well, not a funny thing at all, but the situation, we often take half the Rangitata River. There are times, and certainly in the last 8 weeks, and probably by the time we get to the weekend, we were diverting half the Rangitata River. It's a big river. There's still a lot of water left, but our influence is very significant. And I do appreciate Arawhenua's sort of, I guess, how they interact with us, because I know they would love us not to be operating, return the Maori of the river to what it was, but they're not. I certainly don't feel that it's in a case of shutting us down. It's just making sure we're doing the right things as by them and by us. So that relationship, Richard, and I guess having the support of people on this side of the intake type of thing, those people that benefit from it, being supportive of us and recognising that, the merits of it, and hence that economics sort of work that I was saying. The Ashburton River, that will be, as far as consent holders, when it comes up to the renewal of our consent, there'll be a lot of parties more directly involved, so that will involve most of those water users.
Richard, in response to your second question, how the council can help, as we mentioned at the outset, this is an intergenerational asset. It's important in the community, and so support from our local authority to ensure that the asset endures is critical. So that's why the relationship is valued at that governance and policy level. And the same with Mana Whenua. It's trying to find common ground in that long-term intergenerational focus, which means we need to start now preparing ahead for consent renewal, but having conversations beyond that. We can't wait until the date of renewal. And it is respecting different perspectives, but also reinforcing at the same time how important this entity is and the race is to the economic and social benefit of the district. And we won't shy away from those conversations. So if we can walk hand in hand with the council and having engagement with Mana Whenua, with ECAN, with central government, we'd welcome that.
Tony, you talked about the repairs to the Ashburton River, $6 million, I think.
Correct,
So
yep.
How's that being funded?
We had insurance that covered about, we've got $5 million of the work covered by insurance, but we are exposed both, mainly through the deductible on our insurance policies for $600,000. So, and that comes out of, proportionate water use of all the users
Shareholders,
are paying for that. So, insurance, I'm sure you guys are the same. We're about a $5 million business and we're paying nearly $1 million a year in insurance premiums. It's nearly quadrupled in the last 3 years. So we are looking very strongly at, if I showed you what's on or what's happening internally, you would see risk and insurance sort of every which way you look, just trying to get our mind around that.
Another question, Tony, the structure's 85 years old,
Correct, yep.
a lot of concrete, siphons, under river stuff. So what's the condition like, and how do you know what the condition's like, and how are you planning to keep it in good order for the next 85 years?
One of the things I'm pretty happy about, the changes, I guess, internally, we have an engineering manager. Case has been on board a couple of years, and his appointment was very much along that, because of that need for that long focus on long-term asset management. So he's done a lot of work on preparing an asset management plan and looking at a long-term plan. Asset management plans typically look at 10 or 20 years, well, we need to be looking beyond that. So we have a shutdown starting in May. We'll probably be going back into a rolling every 2 years, so we need to get in there, have a look at them. We've got some repairs scheduled, Neil, for siphons and that, because as you say, the concrete, I liken it to a pair of dentures or the teeth. At 85 years old, everything's getting a bit rattly, and you need to sort of get in there and do a bit of dental work. And certainly in May there'll be a bit of that, but a lot of it's get in there and have a look, and then gauge if you can get away with further dental work, or you've got to put a whole new plate in, type of thing. And we've got a few of those. So it's a rolling program, Neil, and we're just trying to keep on, understand where the critical ones are, get them done, and just sort of smooth that path, because a value of 300 odd million to rebuild it is just but we are looking at eventually quite grandfather's axe to roll through. Hasn't actually been a lot of major work in that area in the 85 years, which is a real credit, but we are thinking, you often talk of concrete having a 100-year life. Well, guess what? We're 85 years old.
Great. So lots of planning and forward thinking going on around
There
the
is,
board
yep.
table, which is exactly what they should be doing.
Yep.
Great. Further questions, councillors? Comments? No, you've convinced them, Tony. That's all
Okay.
very happy. So thanks very much, Tony and Jean, for coming in and sharing that with us. Just keeps us up to date on
Yep.
what's happening with that big asset, which is the lifeblood of Mid-Canterbury. So once again, thank you very much, and we'll have you back in the next wee while to give us an update as to how things are going in the future as well.
Thanks very much,
Thank
Your
you.
Worship. And I'd just like to commend you on this building. Fantastic facility.
We're very proud of it too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wonderful.
great. Thank you. Thanks. Councillors, I think that takes us to the end of the open part of the meeting. And a mover and a seconder, we move into committee. Councillor Brown, Councillor Hooper, all in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Jono.